Big news. Big news. Let's tell them.
Right now?
Yeah, right now.
Juicers, your boys have their first sponsor. Check this out. It's actually really cool because we use it too. So it's like an amazing software.
We are very proud to announce that we have partnered with Rent Ready as our first official sponsor / partner for the Weekly Juice podcast. Are you new to investing? Wondering whether or not you can self-manage your properties? Let us tell you about Rent Ready. Rent Ready is a really awesome property management software that can help you grow and handle every aspect of your real estate business. Rent collection, tenant screening, maintenance, lease signing, listing. Honestly, it has everything.
Yeah, how long do you think we've been using Rent Ready for ourselves?
About 5 months.
Yeah, about 5 months. It's been awesome. We do use their push notification system to send notifications to tenants. We collect rent from our tenants right through the app. And we're actually about to use their new feature, their 24/7 maintenance software called Latchel. And a Latchel will allow you to remove yourself as the landlord, as the middleman between your tenants and maintenance calls. So the tenants can directly call a maintenance line and they will dispatch contractors right to the property.
We should also mention that Rent Ready is unlimited. All their plans are flat price. This essentially means you can keep adding properties to your portfolio without having to pay more. You can close on all the properties you want, and Rent Ready's price stays the same. The best part is Rent Ready's given us an amazing deal to pass on to our Weekly Juice listeners. You guys, everyone listening, can get 50% off a Rent Ready plan at rentready.com when you use our code JUICEPOD. That's RENTREDI.com with code JUICEPOD. JUICEPOD at rentready.com, and you can get 50% off any plan. If this is your first time here, welcome. During our shows, we interview successful entrepreneurs and investors to spread knowledge, advice, and actionable tactics to help others in the pursuit of financial freedom. We discuss successes, failures, systems, motivations, experiences, and key lessons learned along the way in the hopes that these stories help you along your journey. Tune in every Wednesday to get your weekly juice. If you've been here before and like what you've been hearing, please subscribe, share with friends, rate, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. That goes an extremely long way for us. It's simple. Just click on your podcast app, type in our podcast name, The Weekly Juice, click on the reviews, and let us know what you think. The more ratings we get, the more eyes we'll get in our show, and in turn, we'll be able to provide you all with high-quality guests. You can also find us on Instagram at Weekly Juice Pod for daily content and personal finance tips to assist in your journey towards financial freedom. Welcome back to the Weekly Juice. As always, Ryan and Corey here with another episode for you. Today, we have on special guest, Matt Porcaro. Matt's a part-time real estate investor, full-time electrical engineer, and he specializes in teaching people how to take advantage of the special 203K loan. We had an awesome time with Matt. He really peeled back the layers on this specific loan. And it's kind of cool because Corey and I are going through a very similar loan with our newest deal under contract, and it was perfect timing.
Yeah, ours is like the investing version of the 203K, which is mostly owner occupied, but Matt's a wealth of knowledge, and it's very, very niche specific in how to get people to essentially start their real estate investing journey. We always talk about house hacking, but whoa, man, like 203K, like that is an game changer. Listen to the episode because he talks about turning $9,000 into 130 grand in equity in his home in his first deal. So
we always talk about house hacking as like the first way to go. And this is essentially a live and flip house hack.
Yeah. It's a hybrid, and we knew about it, but he broke everything down. So definitely listen to the whole episode. He's got some great stuff.
Let's bring him in. Matt, welcome to the show. We are thrilled to have you here as part of the Weekly Juice.
What's up, guys? Glad to be here. Super excited. Talk a little bit more about this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you could just give people a little background on yourself, pre-real estate, like who you are, where you're from, and how you got in.
Cool, man. So I love that. Why don't you dial me all the way back before real estate?
Oh yeah.
I grew up in a working class family. I think one of the drivers of why I got into real estate investing and why it was so attractive to me was because My dad still is a general contractor, had his own business, very small mom and pop shop, like literally him and my mom ran it, and they had like one extra guy, and that was them. And it really always kind of stayed that way. So kind of small outfit. So the economy is a very big teller of how good our lives were doing at any given time. Like we saw a lot of good times, but we also saw a lot of really rough times. So, when times were good, they were good. And when they were bad, they were pretty bad. And that volatility growing up was kind of something that I always wanted to stay away from. Right. So like that was like, so from a young age, I knew I wanted to be successful. I knew I wanted to make money. And obviously my parents wanted the same for me. So, they did what any other parent would do with conventional wisdom. They're like, just do good in school. You don't want what we have. Having your own business is a nightmare. You don't want this. You want to go work for a company, get a paycheck every week. So I did that. And, when I was in high school and trying to find, what careers to go in, I pretty much was like, what can I make the most money in? And like, also like, and then would it be anything I'm marginally interested in? So, it's kind of funny. I suck at math, but I'm really good at science. I'm like kind of an anomaly like that. So when my we're working with my guidance counselor and they were telling me like, oh, okay, well, what do you want to do? And they're like, well, your grades kind of don't make sense because you're really good at English. You're pretty good at social studies. You're god awful at math and you're really good at science. So like, they're like, you ever think of engineering? I'm like, I don't know. Like, and she's like, oh, it's one of the top paid careers and you can only get it and you could do it in 4 years. You don't have to go to like graduate school or anything. I was like, hell yeah, I want to do engineering. I don't care. Like whatever.
Whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever it was. So I started applying to schools and, my grades were decent enough and I got into school for engineering. And, I went through it. I'm kind of the person where like, I'm definitely not the smartest guy. I was pretty bad at studying, but I'll do whatever I have to do. And I somehow got out in 4 years, got a job right out of school because thankfully engineering is always in a high demand. So, got a job right out of college, right after pretty much 2008 hit. So I was lucky to have a job right out, but very quickly got bored with it. And that kind of led me down this rabbit hole of like, okay, well, number one, I realized very quickly that like getting a paycheck was cool, but then it was also like, wait, but if I work harder, I don't make more. And that was kind of what I grew up around. Right. So me being that type of personality, I just went out and started like looking at other ways to make money. Like, how can I supplement this? Like engineering was cool, whatever, it was fine, but I get bored easily. So I just went out and I started trying out all other, going down the Google rabbit hole of trying to find ways to make money and, found all kinds of things, penny stocks, options, e-commerce stores. I mean, you name it. I've probably tried it, sans a couple things, and tried and failed on a lot of stuff, right? A lot of the stuff, I'm super gullible. I tried a lot of dumb stuff that probably anyone with half a brain would know that was probably a scam. But I did it because I'm just that type of person. I want to try everything. So I did. And as I was going along the way, I was like getting to learn, it's like trying to learn about money and trying to learn about everything. And obviously the book that we all know very well, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, was an absolute game changer for me, as it is for many people. And me specifically, coming from a working class family that kind of didn't understand money, didn't know how money worked. Like, again, like when times were good, times were good. When times were bad, when times were bad. Like my dad, when times were good, we went on vacation. We bought something new. He bought something else. Like he bought, honestly, liabilities and stuff. And like, he never reinvested into his business. And again, I love him to death and he's great at what he does, but it was just, it's a common thing. That's why they call it the 99% and the 1%. Right. So yep. Rich Dad, Poor Dad changed the game for me. And it kind of turned into like something where it's like, okay, well, I kind of understood now. Like it made so much sense, right? I'm like, cause I'm working at this job and I'm like, I'm not going to get rich from this. Like, yeah, I'll make good money, but like, this isn't how I get like rich. Like, how do people get rich? And then they talk about real estate. I'm like, yeah, real estate, like no way. Like I'll be lucky if I buy one house. Like that's insane. Like I always say the thing I always thought was like, real estate's just for rich old people that have like a big like 401k and they just go out and they buy a bunch of deals. So that's always what I thought real estate was. And I put it, I put it on the back burner, and then I ended up finding out about wholesaling. And the whole ploy with wholesaling is like get into real estate investing, no money, no credit, no, whatever. And I'm like, okay, this is great. I could do it. Like I could try this. And I went down there. I'm in a very tough market, suburb of New York City. And, it just didn't work for me. I did try for a really long time, though. I tried really hard on the off market game. I would hang up the signs, at 5 a.m, wake up super cold. So I didn't get yelled at by people, which still happened. Putting up the bandit signs, sticky notes, driving for dollars, all that stuff. And I did that, and I really tried, and I tried and failed a lot. And, eventually I was going, but I knew the real estate thing was like wholesaling hooked me, but now I needed to figure out how I'd make it happen. So I tried a whole bunch of different avenues, and really to no avail. And it wasn't until I took another mentorship that was with my local real estate investment association. And the reason I went to there and I kind of had trust in that was like, I was like, my market's definitely one of the toughest markets. Everyone thinks their market's the toughest, but ours is definitely very tough. And like super high taxes that make deals really hard to work, everything like that. So the lady that ran it, her name's Melissa, and she, she's super mom, has I think 7 or 8 kids, but still has 500 units, flipped 1,000 houses. She's just an all-star. She's just one of those people, you just never understand how they do it. So we went through the whole program, and as I'm going through the program, I'm like, this is all stuff that I've seen in other books, courses, stuff they were just kind of regurgitating the same, flipping advice, buy and hold advice. It's all stuff you've heard before. So I just pulled her aside one day. I'm like, listen, Melissa, I respect what you're doing. I get it. But I don't know, this is stuff I feel like I know already, and it hasn't been working for me. I'm like, if you were in my position, if you could do this all over again, at the time I was 25, maybe. It's if you were my age, I'm like, I got a couple grand saved up in the bank, nothing crazy. What would you do? I don't have a big nest egg. But how would you do? Wholesaling is tough. What would you do? And she's like, what I would do is I would do something called a 203K loan, and I'd buy a house that's really beat up and do a live-in flip. You only need 3.5% down out of pocket. That includes the renovation. So you could wrap the renovation cost into the mortgage, right? So it's 3.5%. So if, say, you buy a house for round numbers, you buy a house for 50,000, you put 50,000 into it, your loan's 100,000, you're only paying $3,500 as a down payment to get into that, right? She said, you do that, you have to live there. That's part of the game because it's an owner occupied loan. But she's like, buy a house, live in the basement, rent out the upstairs to have it pay for itself. And then use the equity that you build on the flip, use the same fix and flip rules, use that equity on the flip, and then go buy more. And I'm like, yep. There's no way. I've been looking around for 4 years and have never heard of this thing. And now she had never done it herself. Full disclaimer. She's like, I've never done it, but I know this is the way. So I'm like, holy crap. So I go home and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to do this. So I go on Bigger Pockets. I go on all this, 203K loans, and it's nothing, radio silence. There's there's information on it, but it's very lender specific. It's just website. It's it's bankrate.com just telling you what a 203K is, but it's not from the investing standpoint that I was looking at it from. So lo and behold, fast forward a little bit, I wanted to get into this, but I never really knew how. And eventually I just made a call one day to the only mortgage broker that I knew. And he was a family friend. And I was like, do you know anything about a 203K? And he's like, yeah, dude, they're awesome. You definitely should jump in this. Let's get you set up. And before I knew it, he was pre-approving me. And it was kind of one of those calls that it was such an innocent thing. And it literally basically started my whole investing career, was that one phone call. And I can get a little bit more into kind of the roadblocks and everything I had because I was figuring this out as I went. But that's really how I found the 203K and how this all started.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Thanks for the backstory. It's great. I think we want to talk about your current portfolio now, and then we can go back to those roadblocks and getting you to the point that you're at. So you discovered this 203K thing, which is house hacking / live and flip on steroids. We talk about house hacking a lot in our show, but we haven't talked about this strategy. You found it. You're like, this is amazing. What's your portfolio look like now? And then can you walk us to kind of maybe the steps that you took to get there?
Sure. So right now, my focus was always kind of in fix and flipping, right? So, I've done 3 deals since then. And a lot of them were all built on that first deal. And that first deal is a nest egg for me. It's like kind of like an open checkbook. And then it created another deal that I had as a buy and hold. So now I have 2 buy and holds, and then I have them financing with HELOCs down the road. So my flipping business has always been my focus. And, as I ramp up the flipping game, I always try to reinvest back into my holding game. Right. One of the cool things with flipping for me is, as I told you earlier, like my dad has been in the construction business. So that's always been definitely an upside for me. Right. So I understand construction, but never understood the number side, never understood like money, as I said, but we really understood the construction side. So kind of one of the things I always wanted to do was like do this with my dad, because my dad, he's 71 now. And he always had his own business. He doesn't have a retirement. He doesn't have like a plan long-term. So flipping for us was like, number one, like the kind of ride into a sunset thing for him, where it's like, okay, we could do this together. And like, he doesn't have to work for other people now. It's like something that we could do together on the side. But then also, do something where we're benefiting both of ourselves. I'm learning his trade better and better and better. And it became like a thing that is like more worth it to me than the money. Right.
Yep.
And that's kind of how it's been. So, the focus now, I think I was telling you before the show, like our focus has been in off market. Like I have off market deals right now, and everything's kind of backing into, how I started this. But, just to dial back a little bit, what I ended up doing was on that first deal, I ended up building now it's like 160 or 80K of equity. And I was able to take out a home equity line of credit on that. What the 203K did for me was it opened up a bunch of doors, right? So I wasn't able to start my flipping business until I did that first deal. So just to dial back, like when I was in that local RIA group, right, I was like finding out ways about creative financing and everything. And the reality is like hard money lenders are out there. But I mean, even back when I started, like hard money lenders wouldn't even touch you unless you've done a deal, right? They wouldn't even touch you with a 10-foot pole. So it was always a thing where the chicken before the egg, right? Like what had to come first? It was like, you'd go to them, they're like, well, you need a deal first. But it's like, in order to get a deal, like I needed the money.
Yeah.
So I'm like, so what was great about the 203K was like, it was like a fix and flip on training wheels, which got me the deal. Then I created a deal sheet. Then I went to hard money lenders. All of a sudden, hard money lenders were willing to lend to me because they just saw this successful deal that I did. Right. So I very quickly leveraged it right into my next deal, which was like one I picked up. It was and I basically combined my equity with the property with the hard money. So in the next deal, it was like 30,000 of it, and teamed it up. The deal was like picked it up for 180. It needed probably like 35,000 worth of work, 40,000 worth of work. It was very small, and it resold for 300K. Right. So, but that I would have never had that if I didn't have that first deal. Cause number one, the hard money lender would let me use their money. Obviously I had to come out with some out of pocket. And then from there, it just it just turned into the next deal and the next deal. And like it was like, so that first property ended up doing, long-term for that $9,500, that initial down payment that you talked about earlier, has, over time, like $500,000 just in the last couple of years, just in profits from equity and flipping profits and the rental profits that I get from
you're
everything
doing
else.
all of this with a full-time job, right? I just want to make sure people realize that you're an engineer by trade full-time, and like you're able to do all of this on the side of your business, correct?
Yeah. So, that kind of leads that's a great foray. And, people, listen, I'm not like a fix and flip guru. As I told you, I haven't done a deals. That's not me. My day job is engineering, and I enjoy it. Right. So it was always like, I always wanted to have another thing. Like when I started, like have another thing, but also have like my day-to-day thing that like have that stability and have both. What I will tell you is that as my flipping business got better and as my real estate game got better, and like as the buy and hold started making me cash flow every month, it put a lot of my 9 to 5 into perspective. And what it allowed me to do was end up finding jobs that worked for me and like worked for my like work-life balance. The first job I got, there was zero work-life balance, nothing. They worked me to the bone. And they treated you like children. It was like they gave you 2 weeks of vacation a year. That was it. And like, you would go ask for vacation in fear because it was like frowned upon that you even used your vacation. So it was like that. It was like that really awful, fear that everybody wants to get away from. But at the same token, right? Like this loan is something where like they want a W-2 income. They want a stable income. So it's funny you bring that up because when I first got into this, right, when I first started like when I was into wholesaling, right, I was like, F the man. Like, I hate, working for the man sucks. Like, I'm going to own my own business, like blah, blah, blah. And it ended up being that like, actually my job is what helped me get started, because at the end of the day, that W-2 is going to be so crucial for you getting loans. Yep. You can make really good money. You could be doing 200, 250 a year, 300 a year. I know people, and they can't get a bank loan because they're just on paper. Listen, you're going to write off a lot too. So you could be pulling in, you'd be doing really well for yourself. But if you have a good accountant, you're going to write off a lot of that too. And banks can only approve you on what you show. So if you write off a lot, whether or not you're actually writing off what you're making or not, like if you're really truly making 100 something grand a year or more, but you're writing it off down to 50 or 40, the bank's only going to approve you on 40. So in retrospect, I was appreciative of my job, and I still work now. I have a really good engineering gig, consulting for a really big company. And but I got to that point and like I found a job that gave me the good work-life balance. But having that real estate as the extra income and having those other streams of income behind me has made it easier for me to kind of go and try a bunch of different jobs. Like I bopped around a little bit in the last 3 years, just kind of finding my way.
I think, I don't mean to cut you off, but I think there's a really strong point there. Like what you're saying is your W-2 job is valued because you actually have optionality around it, right? Like you're not stressed and tied to it because of the flipping business. This side gig that you've turned into this like money machine for you, so to speak, is allowing you to say, nah, I'm good on that 2-week vacation thing. Like I don't have to work here. Whereas a lot of people, if they don't get their next paycheck, Matt, they don't have a choice. So like they know those industries prey on people who are like, they're living paycheck to paycheck. So it's really, really cool. You probably just have a more relaxed feel at your job that you're like, don't get me wrong, I'm sure you put in a lot of work, but it's like just your temperament's probably like, okay, like I could figure something else out if I didn't do this, right? Just based on your side hustle.
Totally. I mean, yeah. And you know what it is? It's like, again, that work, like that W-2, like if you like, it puts everything into perspective. And again, like you said, like it's not so much like I still like working for this company I'm working for now. I love working for this company I'm working for now. And it's like, and it gives me the freedom. Like I'm always working, right? Like I always I have my 9 to 5 and I work hard there and then I work hard after. It doesn't stop. But it doesn't feel like work anymore. Like it doesn't feel like, obviously everybody has times where it's like, oh, this sucks. Like, there's always like those grinds and stuff, but like, it's just, I'm doing things I want to do. And it took me a decade to get there, but real estate was absolutely the avenue that got me to that point. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without my W-2. I just wouldn't have.
Before we get too far into the show, I want to go back to right when your family friend, he dropped, this is the part of the story that I think we left off at, like he started running the numbers for you, right? And got you approved for the loan. Can you take us through that first deal that opened all these doors up for you? Just like what you bought it for, how you found it, and then like the importance of finding a good lender, et cetera, just so everybody can conceptualize where you were at and how that funneled into the rest of your life.
For sure, man. So, so I kind of left you off with the cliffhanger there with the mortgage.
Don't worry, we'll bring you back.
With the mortgage lender. So, so what ended up happening was, again, it was like kind of, and here's, I guess a way to preface it as I've always been a huge analysis paralysis, like example, right? Like I'm just like the worst version of it. Again, I'm an engineer by trade. Like I'm very analytical by trade, and I overanalyze everything. I'm just that type of person. I need to have every detail before I do something. I'm not a doer. You're looking over. Yeah, listen, but that's good about having,
we both do that.
Yeah. I mean, listen,
the thing is we got over it though. Like that's the thing. Like you start out that way, and then once you do it, you're like, you still analyze it, but then you're like, I know I need to take action too.
Just like going through things with like a fine tooth comb though. Like we take the action, but like each scenario you go through and you're like, oh, I got to go line item by line item, but it really just sometimes taking a leap of faith. So I get your point.
Leap of faith is, I mean, it's the perfect example. So like, that's kind of what and the doer, like I call it like the do muscle. Like every time you flex the do muscle, it gets easier to do the next time. Right. And in the beginning, I had never done, I had always just researched, and I always thought that like the next book would have the answer for me, or the next course would have the answer for me. I'm still that way, man. Like it's ingrained in my genetics. Like I'm always going to fight that. But over the years, I've gotten much better at it. But one of the action begets action, right? And I think that phone call was like a little action that I tell people all the time, like the obstacle is the way. Like you just focus on what's there, just take action on don't worry about you're going to get there. You're going to have to learn it when the time comes. And what's cool about the 203K and we'll obviously get more into the details on how I found everything, but it was like, because I didn't know anything about it, it forced me to learn everything about it, but it also forced me to look at things just in front of me, because I had no idea what was beyond that anyway. But that's also really the key that a lot of people get lost on, is like they get too focused on beyond. So it was kind of a blessing in that way, is like, I didn't know what could have been past it. I just knew what they told me right now. And I was like, well, shit, I got to do this. And then it was like just a natural progression. Right. So what ended up happening was I got on we got on a call and he got me pre-approved. Lo and behold, like in my market, Long Island, New York, for anybody listening that's familiar with it, it's a suburb of New York City. It's like its own little bubble, and it's very competitive, super high taxes because it's close to New York City. Because of the taxes, like I made good money, like decent money for 25 years old or whatever. But at the end of the day, it was like pretty much a somewhat entry level salary in an area where it's like pretty much you need 2 incomes to afford a house on Long Island. Like you pretty much won't get approved on a single income unless you're making like buku bucks. But I wasn't. And I got pre-approved, and it was like, he's like, all right, you got pre-approved for like 200K. And he's like, not much of that around here, but like you could get creative and like start looking for some real dumps and like see what you could do. So he's like, listen, just start looking for some stuff. And, and I did, and I was previously. So I started looking for some things, and he gave me a bunch of websites. One of the things he told me, he's like, yeah, here's like foreclosure.com. Here's that. I was like, wait, I could buy a foreclosure with this? He's like, yeah, dude. I was like, no, that's cash only. He's like, yeah, and renovation loans. I was like, what? I had no idea. This was like a super bonus that I got, which like still blows people's minds, because think of what a foreclosure is, right? A foreclosure is an as-is property. The bank's basically making no guarantees on it. They're basically saying like, you're buying it as is. And in reality, a bank isn't going to let you buy a property that you can't get inspected, or you can't like look at what the issues are. That's not a thing that's allowed on a bank, because a bank ultimately owns the property when they buy it. So they want to make sure that they're not buying a pile of shit. So that's why that's built in there. But the reality is that on renovation loans, they're built for this purpose. They're built in a way that you buy them with the intention of fixing them up. So the bank knows, yeah, there's a little more inherent risk there, but the bank knows like that you're going to fix it, and it's going to be in a better position, and it's going to be higher equity when you're done. So they know that they're getting an asset, and obviously it's built in such a way to make sure that all happens, which we can get more into. But and
it's incentivized for many reasons, like for a lot of reasons. They want these houses to appreciate and be worth more, i.e. the township, the school, all of those things. The banks want that, so that they can take your money, but in a good way for you and for them. But go ahead. Sorry.
Right. Yeah. So I was like kind of blown away by this. So I started going through the foreclosure market, which there was a lot of in Long Island at the time. We're still kind of recovering from 2008 around then. So, I mean, there was a lot of stuff out there, but a lot of stuff that like I'm still having competition with, like with cash buyers and stuff, and just looking for anything with a spread. So, you know, the first couple, I was looking for a little while, and there was just like a lot of stuff that was like, just, I would have to offer way too low on. And he's like, listen, just start looking, you know, just look for any, like, blow out your comfort zone. Like, just look for anything that would fit your thing. So I like sorted by lowest price, and I found like a lot of dumpers, man. And I found this one that, and this is another thing I kind of found out by accident, but I've now learned how important it is. I kind of found out about house hacking by accident because of this. So what ended up happening was I saw this property that was listed for like 280 or 290,000, which was again kind of over my budget, but I'm like, I don't know, let me take a look at it. Let's see what we could do. And it was like in an ugly part of town. It was a legit crack house. Like, it was, I mean, people were like literally like crapping all over the floor. It was like there was hoarders in there, or like, you know, not in there permanently, but like there were homeless people using the bathroom when the water lines weren't working. It smelled awful. Everything was ripped into shreds. And I went in, and
I'll take it.
Yeah. So he's like, yeah, dude. He's like, dude, you could fix this up. It'll be real nice. I'm like, there's no way. I'm like, just looking at this thing, and I'm like, oh. He's like, you can afford this though. Here's the reason. He was like, well, so what ended up happening with this one is a legal 2-family. All right. So I found out it was
Wasn't it in a part of town that like you felt like could be on the up and up in terms of like, is there any gentrification there, or were you in like you said that the area was like pretty rough. Was it like,
it was a rough area because so the town itself wasn't bad. It was a good town, pretty much. And it was actually kind of on the up and up. Like it was always like a good town. It's like a middle class town. Sure. But it was in the part of town where it's like all row homes, and it was like very close to city center, and then like very close to like a row of like the front yard on it is a row of bars. And then it's next door to a church, and it's like a parking lot up front. And then there's like an alleyway behind it that had like crackheads in it. So it was like a rougher part of town.
Sure.
But again, it was something that I was able to kind of afford. But he's like, listen, man, he's like, because it's a legal 2-family, we're able to forecast, because basically he's like, I don't think you can afford it, but let's look into this 2-family thing. So the 2-family ended up being, a really lifesaver for me, and was able to get me over the hump for this, because what happens is on an FHA loan, or when you buy a small multifamily loan, right, up to 4 units, right, when you purchase one of those properties, and this is where house hacking comes in, you're able to the bank forecasts that future rental income from the other units as part of your income on the approval process. So when in the beginning, I wasn't really going to get, like, he was basically like, maybe I can get you into it if there's like $20,000 worth of work. But this place was an absolute shithole. So I was like, it needs at least like 50 to 100. Like, it needs a lot. So they forecasted the future rent. And the future rent was able to get me over the hump and get me all in. I was at the real peak, like at the top peak.
But by using that 1 unit's rent to get you as income, like
my debt to income ratio,
to income.
Yeah, my debt to income ratio went down there, and I was able to break into it. So I found it by accident, and like this was the cheapest thing I could find, right? So it was like this was it or anything. So I was able to break in, and now this is when it turned into like, okay, everything that I've learned up until this point from like all the other like programs I was in and like all the books I had read, I'm like, well, let me analyze this deal as if it was a flip deal. Right. And I did that. And let me analyze it as a hold. Right. And I did that, like just using like the calculators and everything everybody gave me. And I pretty much worked it out that, okay, if I pick it up for 270 and I'll put we forecasted it was going to be about 80,000 worth of work. So plus 80,000, I'm going to be all in for 350. I was like looking at the area. I'm like, I think I could get at least 450 when I'm done. Like, I don't know, because there weren't too many comps, but like this thing's such a dump, and like there's stuff in the 4s. I'm like, I can't imagine it being under that. So I was like 450. I'm like, listen, 100K of equity, I'll take that all day. Right. So then,
especially at an entry point so low.
Oh yeah. So we were able to get it through. And I placed an offer on it, and now I don't know what to do next. Now, all of a sudden my banker tells me, okay, well, we have someone called a 203K consultant. They're going to come visit you. And I'm like, wait, what? And now they come in, they're like, okay, who's your contractor on the job? I was like, well, I wanted to use my dad. She's like, no, you can't do that. Pick another one. I'm like, what? They're telling me this now. So now I'm like, oh my God, like now what? Like I'm expecting my dad's going to do the work. Like, I don't know. Like I had no idea what I was doing. So it turns out it's a conflict of interest. You can't have like family do it. The bank didn't allow it. So, luckily my dad has friends in the game and we were able to find another contractor, and it actually ended up working out better that way because that separation was important. But this 203K consultant got involved, and that was another thing that I had learned about. 203K consultant is basically a referee for the whole process, right? Because at the end of the day, how does the bank know that the contractor's doing their work? How do they know that they're doing what they need to do? How do they know that your renovation estimate's close? Luckily for me, I had some experience with construction, so I knew the renovation estimate was close, but they need someone to verify that. So that HUD consultant, that 203K consultant, usually the 203K consultants are inspectors, home inspectors, and they just add this to their list of qualifications, right?
So funny, we're going through this right now. Like you're saying everything that we heard. So
there you go. Yeah. So this is, it's a common thing. And these guys that do it, they do it all the time. Right. So, we brought them on, and then, it just turned into like, okay, how am I going to manage this process? How are we going to close? Now, I learned very quickly there after the fact that my family friend, who again, I'm very thankful that we did this work, he had no idea how to do a 203K loan. He knew of it. He had never done one. Neither had anybody in his entire office. We're going through this process completely blind. We didn't know I was getting asked for paperwork. It became a second full-time job. Like they didn't know. And like, I was like, do this. No, redo this. No, make it look like this. No, it has to look like this. And it was just like this. And we were just shooting from the hip. Literally, it took 4 months to close on this property because of this.
Whoa.
And I learned very quickly how important it was after the fact to have a lender that does these, which they are out there. And we could talk about more how to find them. But, lo and behold, we got through it, right? I'll save you all the kind of the gritty details, but we got through it. There was a lot of close calls. We almost fell out of contract numerous times. It actually, in a weird chain of events, my cousin's friend who worked for this company who started the loan, his brother also worked for the company and had a falling out with the owner, and they fired both of them midway through my loan. So my loan got passed off to someone that knew nothing about it either, but also didn't give a crap about me. So he literally went and begged and pleaded like on his hands and knees, apparently, to get the loan through on the last day that we had before.
Yeah, or else you were going to kick his ass.
He actually said my cousins, because it was my older cousins, right? My older cousins, they're like, if you don't let my friend's little cousin's loan go through, they're literally going to come to my house and beat me up, right? So so he was like pleading with them, and they got it through. But lo and behold, I got out of it and I was done, and like, I just look around and like, I was like, even with all the craziness, like this thing is done. I have this nice house, like, and now I'm going to like start renting it out. I'm not even gonna really have to pay for most of the mortgage. I'm going to live in one unit pretty much rent free. And I built like a nice amount of equity in it, I think. And I looked around, I'm like, how do not more people know about this thing? Like, even with all the BS that I went through, it was still just so worth it. Mm-hmm. And I ended up getting it reappraised right then after, because that's part of the process. And it came back at 480K. So I was in for 350, and it came back at 130,000 in equity. And like, I went to
that was your $9,000, right? That you put down, and then how it came out to $130,000. What did you rent the one side out for?
Initially 2250, and now it's up at 25. High cost of living area, which helped me out there. Insane. You have to with the taxes. But it was a 3-bedroom, and I now rent out both for 2,500 each.
So you're at $5,000 in there after expenses, CapEx, all that. What's your net?
2K.
It's phenomenal. It's a home run.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was. And it took some time to get there, some refinances and stuff like that. But I mean, it's free, it's free, like not free and clear, but the property just pays for itself and then some. And that
all for $9,000 at the beginning. It's like incredible.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Let's pick this deal apart a little bit too. So going into it on the rehab side, we haven't dove too much into it on our podcast specifically, but like, how do you personally, I'm thinking about the loan process, right? It took 4 months. How long did it take you to actually complete the flip and all the rehab work? And then going into that, I know you have a construction background as well as your father and a couple other players around you.
Sure.
How do you go through and estimate like, hey, this is fixing this bathroom is going to be X amount, fixing the floor or replacing the floor is going to be this amount? Like maybe that's a lot to swallow or like walk through, but if you could give it like a brief overview for people, that'd be great.
Sure. So as I said before, like the cool thing about the 203K loan is like, I had a construction background, yes, but the cool thing about it is because you have people like the HUD consultant in there, because like you have like the banks, the whole thing, it's built around like not the assumption that the people getting into this know about construction, right? It's built that way. I mean, they can't have it that way. No one would do it, right? So they have it built in such a way where it kind of helps you get over that process. So a lot of it has to lies on the 203K consultant. So basically, I found out after the fact. Now, since I've created like the 203K way community and all this stuff, I've had the opportunity to meet so many like awesome HUD consultants and lenders and all these people that actually do these things day in, day out and know this stuff backwards and forwards. And I learned from them that a 203K consultant is usually the first person in that property. So the way you want it to really go, and if you're listening and you want to do this yourself, like the first thing to do is you lock something up into contract. You have to have like a rough idea of what the renovation cost is going to be, but it's just enough for you to analyze the deal. Like you go like super conservative. You just like really ballpark it. You don't have to be an expert in this to have any idea because they don't expect it to you. Once that 203K consultant comes in, what they'll do is they'll ask you, okay, what's your budget? They'll say, what do you want to do to the property? And they walk around with you and they do something called a feasibility study. Most of them do this. The good ones do this, right? And the feasibility study is basically like, okay, here's what you'd like to do. Well, number one, here's what has to be done to make this a livable dwelling, right? Because that's the first thing, right? Like my property, it wasn't even livable. So they have like basically a column of like what absolutely needs to be done to have it be code compliant and also be client compliant to be a HUD certified house, basically, because they're a HUD consultant, right? So they know what that takes. Then they say, okay, what would you like to do to the property? And you go around and you tell them like, I want to do this. I want to redo this floor. I want to do that. So they make another column. So they add that up. Then they go through and based on your budget, based on what you're approved for, they basically tell you like, yes, this is doable. No, this isn't doable. And if no, this isn't doable, here are the things that you can cut out from your budget. But what's good about them is they are active in their market, right? They're inspectors. A lot of them have construction backgrounds. A lot of guys that get into inspecting have a construction background to some degree. And then if they do a lot of 203K loans, they know what values and values are in the market. Like it's kind of like, you kind of have to know that if you're going to be a good inspector, or like an insurance claims adjuster or whatever. Like these rates are kind of nationwide, like pretty generic. So like he could basically tell you like, okay, flooring is going to be $4 a square foot, installed or whatever. And he'll go and he'll work all that stuff out. So on that report, he's going to give you a schedule of values on what roughly every little line item is going to be. So now number one, this is going to help you know if like, okay, were you way off? Is your deal done? Like, can your deal actually make it through? Or is there things you need to adjust or cut from the budget? And number two, what it's going to do is it gives you a clear-cut scope of work for you now to bid out to contractors. A huge hack that now like people that I teach to do the loan and now people that follow me and like now are doing this successfully. What they do is you get the feasibility study, which is a line item by line item document. And again, it gives you like every line item, like replace kitchen cabinets, refinish kitchen floor, resheet rock walls, install a new water heater, whatever, like line item by line item by line item. It could be, 50 line items long, but that's the way it needs to be done in order to make sure that it gets done right. You pretty much, they'll either do it for you. It's like usually in an Excel format, you just blank out the values. Then all you do is you reprint out the sheet, you hand it to the contractor and you say, here's the scope. The scope's already done. Please just let me know what your bid is based on the scope of work. So now I'm big in construction, right? So I know construction. I worked in construction my whole career. This is called leveling out the bid, right? So you want to make sure that your contractors are bidding apples to apples. It's newbie mistake number one. Well, newbie mistake number one is they always go for the cheapest contractor. So that's the first thing. So if you're listening, don't go for the cheapest guy. Number two is you want to make sure that you're bidding apples to apples. If you have one guy that's, one guy that doesn't really know like exactly what you meant by like refinish the walls. He might be thinking, you know, completely re-sheetrock it. Another guy is going to be like, oh, I just need to skim coat it. And you're going to see a big discrepancy. So now when you are like figuring out which contractor you want the best, now you have two line items that you can compete against. And if one guy's way off, but he's the guy that you want, you say him like, hey, why are you cost this much for this? I think it seems a little high, and they'll justify it to you. And you might find out there was a miscommunication there. So it helps you. You don't need to know this. The HUD consultant's going to write out this scope of work, but it's going to help you now have something where you don't have to be an expert. You could just look at the numbers and be like, okay, this makes sense. This doesn't make sense.
That's amazing. Oh,
it's so funny. Yeah, I'll let Raj got a question. I can tell.
I'm gonna forget.
But it's funny. We're ahead of the game. Like our consultant for this investment loan that we're talking about is going to be like, oh, did all the work. Thanks. Like literally, because we're doing all of that, putting all the numbers to it. And you're saying that this guy has a lot of the knowledge to do it. But.
Yeah, we walked through. We guess I did a step ahead, right? We brought the contractor in, went line item by line item on person. He's like essentially like a family friend, if you want to call him that.
Sure.
But he came in, gave us a scope of work. We have it all typed out. Now, I'm curious, when the HUD consultant comes in and gives us a scope of work, right? We're going to have them to compare. Do we have to do every single thing that the HUD consultant says it like needs to be done or should be done to make it, I guess, the livable dwelling? You would have to, but are there other ones we can say, okay, we don't have to do this?
So it gets a little tricky, right? Because what ends up happening is like that was like kind of the killer for me, was because my consultant and my contractor weren't on the same page. So there was like a lot of back and forth, and like nobody knew what they needed to do to make. Basically what you need to do is you have to have your consultant and your contractor bid that you choose to pick marry up, and they end up work on like they call it an SOR, like a schedule of repairs, I think it's called, or whatever it stands for. But you like, because that becomes like kind of Bible, in the sense that like the bank is going to release funds based on everything that's on that list, because at closing, that money immediately goes into escrow. So that money like has to be allocated to those things, because that's the way they understand it. Now, listen, like any other construction project, there could be change orders. Rarely is something removed. Like something can't really be removed if there's not good reason for it. You know, if it's like
the fact, you mean after you're already in the loan is what you're saying.
Right. Like you can't remove, like, it depends. Like you can reallocate funds, but just like chopping it off the top usually doesn't happen too much. The only way is if it like finishes under budget or something like that. You can get that loan, you can get that remaining money. You could just say it's finished, or like you went under budget, or like it ended up being like cheaper than you expected. That remaining money just applies right to principal. So it's like you can save it there. But ultimately you have to look at it from the bank's perspective. Like they put that money in escrow. So they want to, you want to make sure that like it gets allocated to something, right?
Got it. So essentially what you're saying is there's these two, the contractor and the HUD officer, they're going to kind of join forces here, right? And come up with a magic list that like, hey, we have to do all of these things, and here's exactly where we think you're going to net out on numbers. And then it goes to the full loan process, and you go through it and money gets allocated out. Mm-hmm. You have the 203K loan, right? That's what owner occupied. Ours is non-owner occupied. It's strictly for investors. You say it's a home renovation loan? That's
home style, it's called.
Home style loan. Okay,
yep.
just to like differentiate.
People differentiate.
Cool. So home style loans for investors, 203K is owner occupied if you're going to live in it.
Yeah.
Home style has owner occupied also. Home style actually is better to go so I'm in the process of doing another one, right? I said to you guys before the show, I'm looking to buy a forever home for my wife, and we have a baby on the way. So we're looking to, I mean, you see here, we're in an apartment. We love it. We have a beautiful view of New York City behind us, but, and it was our dream to be here, but we have a baby on the way and it's time to move into a house. But I'm still going to do the same thing. I'm still going to buy a fixer upper. I'm still going to make it the way I want it. Still going to build equity into it. We're just going to stay put. For single family, home style loan only requires 3% down. Actually, it's less than an FHA because you need a little bit of a credit score. A good renovation lender, that's why having a good like renovation experience lender is so important, because based on your deal, like there's a couple different renovation loans out there. Like the 203K is like kind of like the king and like it's the most well known, but there's other ones out there like the home style where like a good lender is going to know which product is the best for you, but they're all different flavors of essentially the same thing, right? The same thing being you can wrap your purchase price in plus the renovation cost into the loan. You could also refi with these loans too, for people that don't know. If like you want to do a renovation on your home, you could refi into a renovation mortgage and do it that way.
And just to give people like a little bit of an idea, what we ran into is that rates are pretty low. They're actually starting to creep back up a little bit. We're noticing, but like these 203K and renovation loans, at least for investors, we're finding that's like 0.75 to a percent point higher than they would be, I guess, maybe the investor one to the 203K owner occupancy. Is that accurate kind of like across the board?
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, for the investor side, I mean, that's peanuts compared to like doing hard money or yeah. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a little higher. I mean, obviously you can understand why. The renovate. So like the exit strategy I had with my renovation, with my first one was, so obviously FHA loans have PMI, right? Because if you put less than 20% down, you're effectively a subprime borrower, right? So they hit you with mortgage insurance every month. For people that don't know what that is, basically you're paying into an insurance program that everybody else that has an FHA loan does to give banks incentives to do these loans. Basically, the government saying, "Hey, listen, they all pay into this big bucket. If one of them defaults, we'll pay you back with this FHA money," right? So but if you refinance into conventional, you can get rid of that PMI immediately if you have at least 20% equity in the deal. So at the very least, anybody that uses this loan should always focus on at least having 20% equity when you're done. That way you can refi out of that PMI immediately and then get that extra boost in cash flow. Plus you'll usually get like, a basis point or two off of your interest rate, because chances are in a renovation loan, they'll tweak it a little bit. They'll give you like a little bump, like a quarter point in interest rate. But when you refinance back into conventional, they take that off, especially if you have a good rate, especially if you have like equity there, you have decent credit and everything like that. You could usually get that back down, get your mortgage payment back down. And if you want to rent it long-term, I mean, that's extra cash flow in your pocket.
I think it's cool how you've built your whole community around the 203K way, because that's kind of what set you on fire and allowed you to open so many doors in regards to investing. Being that you have, you are the guy for the 203K loan here. Can you explain to people, I'm sure you've built, essentially connections and relationships with a lot of people that land contractors, et cetera. Can you give advice on like how someone can find the perfect or a very good loan officer for this type of loan? And then also maybe on the other side, like how would you vet a good contractor, and how do you know to put the right guy in the right spot?
Great question. So there's one little trick I have. I'm going to try to condense it as quickly as possible, but there's something called a 203K endorsement summary. All right. If you Google it, Google 203K endorsement summary. The first thing that comes up is going to be on the HUD website, and it's basically this list of every lender that does 203K loans in your market this month. So you go down, like you'll go to the most recent month and year, and it'll give you the name of every lender that did a 203K loan in your market, right? Major market. Like you go like, obviously like it won't go by town, but it goes in like your major metro area, right? So you go there and you have a way. I actually have a tool that does this automatically if you get my book, but that's besides the point. Little plug. You could do this on your own. You don't.
What is the book? No, plug it right here.
203ksecrets.com. It's just a book. It's literally $2. If you want to, if you want to bundle it with other stuff, you can. But the lender finder tool basically does this very quickly for you. But essentially it sorts everything. So you can go and look at your market and see which lenders are doing the most in every market. So from there, all you do is you like, okay, whatever, Loan Depot does it. You call up Loan Depot and you go to the local branch in your market. You say, hey, who does the most renovation loans in your office? Can you put me in touch with them? And they'll put you in touch with that loan officer. And then you're set, right? And then listen, you quiz them. I mean, listen, if they sound like they don't know what they're talking about, chances are they don't. If they sound like they know what they're talking about, like chances are they probably do. So you could start that way. Another way is to kind of reverse engineer it. You can look up 203K consultants, because who knows who's doing the most 203Ks in an area than the guys that need to be on every single project. So what you could do is you could go on 203khudconsultants.com. It's like a full directory of every 203K consultant in the country. You type in your your zip code, your area. You can look at HUD consultants in your area. And you could call them up, say, hey, listen, I'm looking to do a 203K loan. And listen, a lot of them aren't good. Like, I'll be honest with you, no offense to any of them out there, but there's a lot of them, they just put it on top of their resume and they don't really do them that much. But if you call around to a couple, you'll start to know which ones do the best. You could call them direct and be like, hey, do you know like who's doing like which banks you're working with in this market that are doing a lot of these? And if you get a guy on the phone that seems to know, or gal that knows what they're doing, they're going to know who's doing the loans in that market. So what that's going to do is that's going to quarterback that lender's kind of the quarterback. They're going to be the ones that know the rest. Now, as far as the contractors go, there's a lot of different ways to find contractors on this. Number one would be leveraging that network. Number two, and I think probably one of the most underutilized things is just your personal network. Like, make a post on Facebook. Do you know anyone have any contractors they really liked working with? And build your network that way. Like, you can always ask your HUD consultant. You could always ask the lender. They'll probably make you, like, some of them are not comfortable with it because they don't want to feel like they're steering you in a direction or like pouring. But I think what it's healthy to do is, like, if they do give a recommendation, sprinkle it in with the contractors that you have, and then just have them all set up and like kind of have them all pre-qualified before you find a deal. Because once that deal comes in line, you want to get them in there as soon as possible. And if you only depend on one guy and he comes in and he's not ready, you're screwed because you got to close on this loan. So you want to make sure you have a couple guys in the mix that know what they're doing. And honestly, just piquing their interest like anything else. I mean, one big thing with 203K contractors is, they need to be licensed. They need to be insured. They need to be bonded, right? They can't be fly by night guys that have no cash flow. A big thing with 203K loans is they want to make sure that you have cash flow. One of the ways they do that is they really don't give you deposits. It depends on it, because that money's in escrow and it's literally guaranteed. They want to make sure that you're not going to be cash poor on this project, right? Because the inspections work in draws. Now, listen, people think that turns a lot of contractors off. Good. The contractors that it turns off, you don't want on your project anyway, because listen, I came from a contractor that was poor at times. Self-admittedly, he's taken deposits and used it to pay the mortgage because my parents were behind 2 months on it, right? You don't want those guys. No offense. My dad's great at what he does. Everything was great, but that's when bad things happen because they run out of money, and you don't want that to happen.
It's very important. And we were worried about that too. Like, our terms of our loan are like 90% during the project, and then they have a 10% retainer at the end. And I'm like thinking to myself, oh, are there any contractors that are not going to like this? And like, to your point, well, yeah, you'll weed out the bad ones. Like, if they can't wait for 10%, then they're probably not a good contractor. So
exactly.
Cool. We have we're kind of winding down here, but we have a couple points here. And one of them is a question for you. And like, how do you find a lot of these deals? Like you mentioned the first one. What's your strategy or recommendations for people and how they should find deals that you can use either for the 203K or just in the investments in general?
So the beauty of the 203K loan is it kind of allows you to play in what I call like this Goldilocks zone, like this 203K Goldilocks zone, right? And because you're number one, you don't like, if you're doing this, like if you're listening to this and you want to make a good financial decision, like especially right now where things are just flying at crazy prices, you don't want to play in that market. That market is foolish to be playing in right now. People are paying way overpriced on this stuff. The second there's a correction, they're going to be all underwater on their mortgage, right? Because they're buying overvalued of what these properties are. A 10% correction is going to screw a lot of people. Right.
Good point.
So you want to be you don't want to be playing in the retail game, but now now you want to just be looking at like the crappiest stuff that's on MLS. You don't need to go off market for this stuff. 99% of the people that do my thing, like, and do this program or like do the 203K, like they get it from stuff that's on the MLS, because listen, the stuff on the bottom of the MLS is usually still also too overpriced for like a fix and flipper like myself. Like I usually need to pick stuff up at 50 cents, 60 cents on the dollar. They're listed on MLS for like 70 cents on the dollar, but 70 cents on the dollar is usually pretty good for a 203K loan because you're coming out of pocket with so little. You're only coming out with 3.5%. If you make 10% equity, you're tripling your money, right?
Great.
And that's like on the low end, right? So, and that's not including like long-term like appreciation and like if you rent it out, like principal pay down and all that stuff, right? So what's good about it is like just look for foreclosures, look for anything as is on the MLS, because down there you're only competing with either other renovation loan people, which there's not many, or just really stupid cash buyers that just don't know what they're doing and are going to weed themselves out over time anyway, right? So I think just being stringent in that low end of the MLS market, you're always going to find stuff. Foreclosures are trickling back online. They were obviously gone for a little while, but I think there's going to be I know there is. I'm already seeing it. There's a window of opportunity with foreclosures coming back online right now. And I think it's going to be an undertapped area, at least for the next couple months, next couple of years. And then I'm talking foreclosures that never got through from like 2018 that were all like paused because of COVID, but they were already processed, but they just never got to the courthouse steps, right? Those auctions are starting to happen again. So you're getting foreclosures that are from 2017. These banks just want to get rid of them, especially because banks are hurting right now. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm thinking while you're on the topic of foreclosures, I'm thinking of someone sitting on Zillow and they're going through and they see all these properties for sale and you see foreclosure. What are the steps you take from there? Like, how do you even buy a foreclosure? Because it's the bank technically owns it, correct?
Yeah. So usually there's a lot of confusion with foreclosures, right? There's pre-foreclosure, which means the bank basically said, hey, you're late on your mortgage. We're going to foreclose on you. That could be years. It could take forever, right? Then there's like, they try loan modifications. In this day and age, it takes a long time for people to get out. What ends up happening is they'll get foreclosed on. Once that foreclosure happens, that means the bank took it back, but they didn't do anything with it yet. Then they go to the courthouse steps. They go to try to auction it off. Now cash buyers could buy it up at auction, but if the banks are at every auction. So if the property doesn't go for what they maybe want it to go for, at least a bare minimum, they come and buy it back. At that point is when it's called REO as we know it, right? Real estate owned, bank owned. Those get listed on MLS by realtors. There's usually realtors out there that specialize in these things. They get listings from banks and they list those. So those are the ones you want to look for. You want to look for foreclosures, bank owned. You don't want to look for like pre-foreclosure or foreclosed, or even auctions. Really tricky for 203Ks for a number of reasons, but foreclosures are really what you're looking for, the bank owned properties.
That's great.
Thank you.
That was a great explanation. And I don't think we've had that a lot on our show. Like not a lot of people have walked through it. So
it's a big confusion, man. And it took me a long time to figure it out. I'll be honest with you. So
no, it's perfect. So I guess right before the end of our show, I want to talk to you about your specific future goals. Like what are your future goals with the 203K, your flipping business? What do you see, Matt doing in the next 3 to 5 years, like with your business here?
For sure, man. So honestly, as it turned out, this whole 203K way community became something where I never thought it was going to be another almost business in and of itself. People were asking me how to do it. I tell people, I'm an open book. Like there's nothing that I hide behind any type of course or book or anything like that. I'm an open book, man. But there's people that were like, hey, can you help me with this? Like, can you walk me through it? And I do that for people now. And it's been super rewarding. Something way cooler than flipping a house yourself is showing someone how to do it and watching them do it successfully is like way cooler and way more gratifying. So I've been doing that. I've been doing my flipping business. As I told you, it slowed down with COVID, but during that I was helping people get into properties even during COVID. So that was taking up my time. Long term for me, like I want to ramp up to 6 to 12 flips a year. And I've been pushing the off market game. That's been my goal in the last 6 months. And I've been, really getting good at it. And I'm really getting a lot of leads come in as of recently. So like my flipping game plans on picking up again. Hopefully if everything keeps going well with the off market stuff. So just continuing that and like, honestly, continuing this 203K way community, which has again become like this new, like, thing where I could do it all day. Like if I could do this forever, like I would love it because it's the most gratifying piece of work that I do. But really just to continue to keep flipping houses, get to that 6 to 12 deal a year mark, and then start reinvesting back into into buy and holds. I want to do the flip to help my dad build a nest egg. I want to get into, help build a nest egg for my family, myself, with that liquid capital, and then start going back to buy and holds again. It's always been a long-term goal of mine, but long-term goals for mine is like, I think like senior living is going to be a huge thing in the next 10 to 15 years with boomers hitting that age. So like if I can find a way and break into that avenue, it's a whole new world, but that's like a stretch goal for me. I always thought that would be a cool market and something that, again, probably very rewarding to like build nice places for boomers kind of sailing off into the sunset to live. So that's like a stretch goal, is to like build multifamily or develop.
Awesome. Really cool. And the 6 to 12, deals a year, I'm sure we'll get there. It's just pretty cool. We haven't got into flipping. We've talked about it. We love long-term strategy. So, maybe there's a chance to flip down the line, but that's very cool.
Before we get into the last segment of the show, one last one for you. You mentioned a lot of off-market deals as opposed to MLS. What do you mean by that? You just mean like essentially building relationships and then you're just finding deals from people in your community now?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously so it's a lot of tactics that are used in wholesaling, sending mail out, driving for dollars. Driving for dollars is like just driving neighborhoods, looking for properties that are like the ugliest house on the nicest block. We're doing that now for our forever home. Like literally, just to clue you into that, like because we're looking in such a tight radius, we want to live in a very small neighborhood because we want to be close to our family. And it's like kind of a small little bubble where we are. But there's not much out there right now. And even when there is a lot out there, like there's only so much we can look for that's like specifically what we want in the area that we want. So what I've been doing is we've been writing letters saying like literally like, hey, my wife and I are interested in moving back into your town. We have a baby on the way. We just wanted to know if there's any way you'd be willing to sell, but also focusing on properties that actually need work. That way we can, number one, get into it for a good price, hopefully. But then also take it up long term. I mean, I have my off market stuff right now has all come from mailing, from driving for dollars. Driving for dollars, I think, is kind of the most targeted way if you don't have like an insane budget. The wholesalers that I know that are really killing it on like list mailing are mailing like $30,000 to $50,000 worth of mail a month. I don't have that. Like, I'm not like,
not to put into marketing.
Right. Not to put into marketing. Exactly. So like, I'm not there yet. Like I'm not ramped up there yet. So I go more direct. I go driving for dollars and I just like take it right to the source. And I look distinctly for it takes more time, but I have a much higher success rate. I got a call yesterday. I got a call last week. Like I'm getting lots of calls coming in. I'm just fostering these relationships now and really just becoming a good person. Like I've found that authenticity is the best thing in this game, which is so overlooked. And these days, everyone wants to make a buck. I found that just listening to people has got me so far in this game, way further than just being in the beginning. I just cared all about money. Like when I was trying wholesaling, and I think that's why I failed the first time. This time I've gotten so much further, just like listening to people and like caring about them and like really trying to give them their best out. With whether it be like through a cash sale or helping them get tenants out. There's one thing I was doing now, helping guys get tenants out, which I had never done before, but I just went and listened to the tenants and worked out cash for keys deals with the tenants that the owner never could. He used me to do it. Right. And it was like, it was just those little rewarding aspects that I get from it. So that's been my focus now. And I'm doing it for my next 203K. And I'm also doing it for my flipping business.
Blows my mind. A lot of people are just all about efficiency, and driving for dollars to me seems very slow. And like you're literally going, like you're driving past these properties in like hand-to-hand combat. But the cool thing that you're mentioning is like, it almost reminds me of like the tortoise and the hare, right? Like slow and steady wins the race.
For sure.
You're working these relationships, you're getting your name out there, and you're listening, you're helping people. So that's incredible. Our next segment of the show is called the Core Four, and it basically is like personal questions just to get to know you a little bit and kind of how you tick. So
cool.
First off, I'm gonna start.
Do it, yeah.
First question is, we'll keep it pretty basic for you, but what's your favorite investing or business book and why?
Okay, so I get asked this question a lot, obviously, and I always put put Rich Dad, Poor Dad on the other side because that's like a layup, easy answer. It's everybody's favorite book. Real estate book, I have to give a shout out to the book on managing rental properties by Brandon Turner from Bigger Pockets. Like I told you guys earlier, like when I got into this game, I had no idea what was ahead of me. So I just had to naturally do like whatever was next, I had to learn about. And when I finally got like done with the project, I'm like, okay, I've never been a landlord. I have no idea how to be a landlord. I know nothing about landlording. And I was like looking at other things, and like that book I read start to finish. And like I based my whole landlording business on that book. Knock on wood, I've had the best tenants. Everyone pays on time. It's a dream working with my tenants. And a lot of it is built off of that book. So if you have no idea about how to be a landlord, that book is like, it literally turned me into a landlord overnight. And I've had the best experience since.
It's so funny you say that, because we both read the book. We love it. And the only struggle that we've ever had with any tenants are ones that we inherited that we couldn't like necessarily like kick out right away. The ones that we've put in there have been great tenants, and it's a tribute to that book too. It's
I literally use it as a Bible. I have it highlighted, everything, and I carry it with me everywhere. My wife is like, "Why do you carry your books everywhere? Didn't you already read them?"
Oh, me too.
Yeah. Yeah. I just, I kind of like look back at it sometimes. I'm in the car cranking notes. I'm like, geez, oh yeah, chapter 5. I love that.
That's a testament to a good book. If you could bookmark it and highlight things and like go back and reference it, that's how you know it's a good book, in my opinion.